what do you think's a reasonable hope right now for theaters? And I guess let's focus on New York City first.
Yeah, well, I think theaters in general, Carl, are likely to open in North America with real product, more meaningful product around Memorial Day, maybe hopefully earlier in May. Black Widow is scheduled for early May, and that's still out there. There was a significant development last night, which is that Paramount actually moved up Quiet Place 3 into the Memorial Day slot. So that's the first time that people have really advanced releases, and that's kind of a milestone. It's really important that New York opened, and it has more importance just than one state, because if you look at the global movie business, you really need an LA release and you need a New York release to establish sufficient buzz on a global basis. And, as well as Tenet did, which is, over $350 million, that was with New York and LA closed. And that's because that's where the critics are. That's where a lot of the press is, the talk shows, the premieres. So it's quite a big deal that New York opened.
Wow, that's interesting. The moving a date up is something we haven't seen in a while. I know we're not going to go back to the old world, but do you think that emboldens some studios to maybe make the window a little bit, not shorter, but maybe a little bit longer?
Well, the windows, that's resolving itself, I think, in a good way, Carl. I know during the height of the pandemic, people experimented with different things, going from PVOD, day and date, to day and date releases. But if you look at kind of as the reopening appears closer, you have the deal that Universal, your parent company, reached with a lot of the exhibitors, which was for blockbuster movies, windows more than 30 days, 30 to 45 days. I think it's likely that Warner in 22 comes up with a fairly reasonable windowing scheme. Disney has publicly said it depends on the kind of release, and they've constantly reinforced the fact that for blockbusters, the kinds of movies that IMAX does, it's going to be more along traditional lines. So I don't think I think the windows were a reaction to a short-term solution rather than a permanent issue, and especially for IMAX, where our films play for 1 or 2 weeks and they're big blockbusters. I don't really see that as a material issue.
Hi, Richard. Good morning. It's Deirdre. And to that note, you were saying earlier this week at a tech conference that you think that tech companies will accept, limited windows and in exchange, for the stature afforded by theatrical engagement. But I wonder, how do you know that stature is still there? I mean, we just had the Golden Globes. Ratings were pretty dismal. So does that suggest perhaps that it's sort of losing that appeal?
So, Deirdre, I think it's the opposite. I think the reason the ratings were dismal, they were down 60%, is because people weren't interested in streaming movies. It's an award show that celebrates movies. And I think people really, when you're in your living room and you're watching what I call a 2-hour television show, it's not a movie. I mean, there haven't been franchises built on streaming properties. The numbers at the box office that simultaneously came with streaming, were down significantly. I think the Golden Globes point out, just that the strategy didn't work. I think it worked for a pandemic. And I think, I didn't answer actually Carl's first question, which is related, is look what's happened in Asia and in China in particular. Chinese New Year was up 33% from the record set in 2019. So 2019, the best year in the history of China for movies. And this year, 33% better with 75% capacity limitations. Japan just had its biggest movie ever called Demon Slayer. And in IMAX, it was our biggest movie ever as well in Japan. And people want to get out of their homes. And, I've heard this narrative, will they go out? Are their patterns changed? The answer is they're going out. The patterns aren't changed. There's empirical evidence from Korea, from Taiwan, from Saudi Arabia. This is just kind of I know that a lot of people who are rooting for disruption think the world's going to be different, but there's no evidence to show that. And in fact, if you look at what happened here in North America, almost every big movie held. So, Bond still has a theatrical release.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.